Jay, I am so excited about today. We're going to talk about the band, the 1975. This is going to be awesome.
The 1975? Where are you putting the "the" in front of it?
Yeah, the band, the 1975. We're going to do a whole show on the 1975.
Ooh, hold on. Yeah, just as I suspected, I have 0 records by the band, the 1975. We're going to talk about 1975. It's the 50th anniversary of 1975 and all the great music that was released that year, John. Right?
Vinyl friends, welcome to another edition of your favorite vinyl show, Vinyl Ventures.
It is my favorite vinyl show,
Yes.
for sure.
And we have our real Vinyl Ventures logo and album back.
Yeah, Kenny had to take off.
We sent Kenny packing.
He had a fire to go sit by and drink
Yeah.
cocoa. I don't know why. He just looks like a guy that would sit by a fire, drink cocoa, and talk about fishing, right?
I think he did that a bunch.
So tell us today what we are doing
Well,
now that you know.
now that I know, we're going to talk about the year, I want to put the in there.
Those jokes die
The
hard
year 1975 and the 50th anniversary
of that year.
of that year.
Man, lots of good albums.
Lots of good albums, and music was starting to bounce all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, in the early 70s, you had all of these guys who had like these adult contemporary songs, but rock and roll was bubbling under there too. And I think by the mid 70s, rock and roll really gained a lot of footing. And then you had bands who had like the peak part of their careers right in the middle of the 70s, for sure.
Yeah, and there were bands like Led Zeppelin that were ruling the roost. I mean, Led Zeppelin was touring like mad, and their albums were selling gazillions.
Rolling Stones.
Rolling Stones were in their heyday.
I mean, they had been together for 13, 14 years by then. But
Yeah.
the 70s, in my heart, the 70s are when the Stones were just untouchable.
Yeah.
For sure. And then you had other breakout bands just starting to chug along, like Kiss, who had a huge couple of albums in 1975. It was just a huge year for music in general.
Yeah, and I mean, to show you how much music was across the board, I think the best-selling song from 75 was Love Will Keep Us Together.
Really?
Yeah.
Who was that? I can't even remember. Her name.
Captain.
Oh,
and
Captain and
Tennille.
Tennille. That's
Yeah.
right. So it's funny. I know I've mentioned the Yacht Rock documentary to you a few times.
Yeah.
It's funny. They talk about how Captain and Tennille's not really yacht rock, but he always wore the hat.
Yeah. That kind of became the yacht rock standard.
Yeah, and the ironic thing about Love Will Keep Us Together with Captain and Tennille is they are no longer together.
Dunzo.
So we want to remind you guys, we have a whole boatload, to stay on the yacht thing. We've got a whole boatload of stuff on our YouTube channel. We want you to go there, check it out, look at all the things. Look at the long form shows, look at the shorts tab. We have what we call mediums, and those are usually the 5 to 15 minute top fives that we do. We have all of that stuff just waiting on our YouTube channel for you guys to check it out. And what do we want them to do when they do that, John?
Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and comment.
And share.
And share.
Yes. And, we would be remiss if we didn't tell you Happy New Year, because tomorrow we're going to be in 2025.
Yes.
That seems like science fiction to me.
Yes, it does.
So what is the first album that you'd like to start with to talk
Well,
about 1975? Is it the 1975?
no. No.
All right. I'm going to take the Big Beautiful record down.
And we'll start with our good old buddy, Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks.
This is widely considered to be his masterpiece.
Yeah, it's certainly not my favorite Dylan album.
Yeah.
I did see him in the early 80s, and he was still in that phase.
Oh, you saw him live?
Yeah, I saw him live in Lafayette, and he wouldn't play like...
Any of the hits?
No, he wouldn't play like a Rolling Stone or
man.
all these songs because they had, pagan...
Or anti-Christian?
Yeah, anti-Christian values.
Yeah,
So
that's so interesting.
it's weird that at that stage Dylan went through that phase.
Yeah. It's also timely that we're starting with Dylan because his biopic, I think that comes out on Christmas Day.
Yes.
So
yes.
by the time this show is up and out the door, that will have been going for about a week. That looks like a really interesting movie to me. I
Yeah.
mean, I just saw that at one of the premieres, Timothy, whatever his name is, that's playing
Chalamet. Yeah.
Is playing Dylan. At one of the premieres, he dressed as Dylan in '93. So there was a picture. He had the same shirt on, the same scarf, the same jacket, the same like stocking cap,
Yeah.
and he had like his hair was like almost dyed blonde. Very funny.
Yeah, he's a great pick for that because he's kind of he's an off-kilter kind of actor.
Yeah, for
and Dylan is an off-kilter kind of music artist.
Actor. I still say this is a show.
Yeah.
I still say that he's playing a character and we're all watching a show. Not
Yes.
just a rock show, but like, who is he? What does he really think? Where do the songs come from? I think it's all, I don't know. That's a long form show, but
Yes.
I think it's definitely a show. This is a lot of people's favorite Dylan record. And for me, it's hard to pick a Dylan record because he's got like 700 of them, right?
Yeah.
What number is this? Do you know?
This is Dylan's 15th studio album.
By 1975.
Yes.
15. What were the...
There's only really one big single off this, Tangled Up in Blue.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't know what that noise that I just made was. I think I just summoned a whale.
Good job.
Tangled Up in Blue is probably my favorite Dylan song.
And it didn't do great. The single Tangled Up in Blue peaked at only number 31 on the Billboard 100, but it remains one of Dylan's best-selling studio releases with a double platinum certification.
And it's probably more than that by now.
Yeah, I'm sure it's much more than that.
I love the artwork, like kind of the abstract profile, and then he's got like a pink scarf on or something.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that I think a lot of people kind of pass it by,
Mm-hmm.
but I think a lot of really hardcore Dylan fans are like, you got to have this one.
Yeah. And I think it's also one that there have been many like remake collections, like they'll have multiple artists do songs. You know what I mean? Like a tribute album.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's been
That's
given
a-
this treatment a lot.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a good one to start with, man.
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan is his own thing. I don't think you can say Dylan's heyday was, I don't know, maybe it was kind of the 80s when, maybe it was around 10 years later when he toured with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers for a long time. He toured with the Dead in the mid-'80s. He did We Are the World. He was a member of Traveling Wilburys at the end of the 80s. So maybe his heyday was actually later.
I think he's had a lot of heydays.
Yeah. I mean, I think his career is a heyday.
Yeah,
For
it
sure.
really is.
You've seen him, right?
Yeah, I've seen him several times.
Yeah. What was the experience like?
He's always good.
It's just what Bob Dylan do you get that night?
Yeah, well, and I have seen him, and he's been not the greatest when his voice was having issues.
Yeah.
The last time I saw him in 21 or 22, he's a pretty old guy. So, he's 80 plus now. So he couldn't get around as well. So he played a stand-up piano, so he had somewhere to lean. And it was more like a vaudeville act.
Interesting.
Because he learned that he can't really, he doesn't have the same tone and vocal range that he used to have. So he does songs in small bursts.
Interesting. Huh. Well, Bob is his own thing for sure. Nice one.
You're next.
Well, my first one it's this guy named David Bowie and Young Americans. This came out in 1975. Actually, March 1975. We were talking about it earlier. This is kind of Bowie's. A lot of people consider this Bowie's R&B or blue-eyed soul album. He called it his Plastic Soul album.
His Plastic Soul.
Whatever. This was kind of a breakthrough for him in the U.S. because Young Americans was one of the singles, and Fame was the other single off of this. And obviously he struck a chord with this. This is his Diamond Dogs came out in 1974. This came out in 75. This is his 9th album in 1975. So we're talking about artists, and it's going to be a theme through the rest of the show, artists who put multiple albums out in 12-month periods.
Yeah.
It was a thing for the record companies to just keep pumping that product out.
Yeah, and if they had the material, they were going to do it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we were taught also, you can't see it, but the texture on this album is
it's
tactile. You have to
it's
feel
very
it.
tactile.
And
You can see it, by the way.
oh, can you?
Yeah.
Cool.
You can.
Voice of Jacob, VOJ. I love the way that the cover looks and the way he looks on it. He's another one. It's so weird. We didn't really plan it, but our first two artists on this show are people who are playing characters.
They really are.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, who knows who Bob Dylan really is, but who knows who David Bowie really ever was. I mean,
right.
he was Ziggy, he was Aladdin Sane.
The Thin White Duke.
The Thin White Duke. It's just...
all across the board.
Yeah. And he's another one that I think looked at his career as a long view as opposed to any specific album. But this is really kind of what got people hooked on David Bowie in 1975. And he was prodigious, putting albums out all the time. So like I said, Young Americans and Fame were the only two singles off of this. And it's fun to listen to Bowie because wherever you start is going to be different from where you end up or what you go back to.
Yeah. And he was an artist that he was never afraid to take a chance.
Yeah. I mean,
even later in his career.
Oh yeah. I mean, Black Star is it's super dark.
Yeah.
Because he knew he was dying.
Yeah.
But no, you have to give him the utmost respect because he did what he wanted and he did what he was passionate about. I don't really have a favorite era of Bowie. I mean, I love Ziggy and we've talked in depth about that.
Yeah.
But there's so many parts of his career where he just exploded, like the early to mid 80s too. He was just everywhere on the radio all the time. But David Bowie, you can't go wrong with David Bowie and Dylan.
No.
Maybe we should do a show about like the best the best artists who have passed and like put a whole band together.
We could.
Yeah, David Bowie would be a good singer. All right, what's next on your docket?
On my docket, well, we're going to do another guy who was going through some changes. Alice Cooper.
Yep.
This is his first album as Alice Cooper.
Where it's not the band, it's the character.
Welcome to My Nightmare,
Yeah.
Alice Cooper. And it came out in February 28th, of course, of 1970. Everything's 1975 here.
Yeah. He certainly is one of the like 70s icons.
Oh,
for sure.
yeah.
And at this point, he'd been around since, 68, 69.
Yeah, this was his, let's see, this was Alice's debut solo studio album. And, they kind of, because he'd had so much other work as the Alice Cooper band that, and he's not wearing makeup for this either.
Interesting. I've always loved this one. I don't have this.
Yeah. It was one that it's a pretty used copy, but the vinyl is pristine. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Welcome to My Nightmare, Cold Ethel, The Awakening, Only Women Bleed. That's a big one.
yeah, he had 3 singles: Department of Youth, Only Women Bleed, and Welcome to My Nightmare. And this spurned a Welcome to My Nightmare concert film in 76.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting.
And a TV special.
I've always thought that the artwork was interesting on here.
Yeah, it's kind of different.
Yeah, it almost looks flowery when you just kind of glance across it, but these are like insects
Yes.
all around here. Yeah. Alice is still going strong, man.
Yeah.
His live band is fantastic. Obviously, he's like in his mid 70s, maybe 76 now.
Yeah.
But he's still doing it, and he's a road dog. He usually schedules his tours to where he's touring around Halloween, and he's done the tours with Rob Zombie around Halloween. He'll play 10 or 15 dates, and it's always fun to see Alice, and he's like just always going, kind of like Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll open for anybody or do his own shows. He doesn't care.
He just wants to play.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. I was surprised. All the Alice Cooper albums I have, I don't have Welcome to My Nightmare.
It's one that I had to have because I remember as a kid, my cousin listened to this a bunch,
Yeah.
and it's just one of those albums that really just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, kind of speaks to the
Yeah.
era. Yeah, that's a good one, man. I like it. Well, this band, a lot of you might not know much about them, but they're called Fleetwood Mac. And this is their 10th studio album, released July 1975. It's the band's second eponymous album. The first being in 1968 was also Fleetwood Mac. This is the first album with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. And after Bob Welch left the band in 1974, those two came in. And it's also the band's last album to be released on Reprise until 1997's The Dance, which was a huge comeback album for the band. But the singles from this, Over My Head, Warm Ways, Rhiannon, and Say You Love Me. So 4 enormous songs off of this. And there are bands that almost seem like cats because they have 9 lives.
Yeah.
And Fleetwood Mac is definitely one.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say Aerosmith is another one.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had, ebbs and flows of their career. But this, 3 of the songs that they released from this are like standard tunes for them still. So that's pretty crazy to have a major personnel shift in a band that's got that much of a high profile, and they knock it out of the park.
Yeah, it seems like 75 was a year for a lot of change.
Yeah, and turmoil.
Yeah.
But music marches on. I mean, it is amazing how how many ups and downs bands can go through and come out on the other end of it. So, yeah, I've never been a huge fan of this era of Fleetwood Mac, but there are certain songs of theirs that you just cannot deny how good they are.
Oh, yeah.
And I personally love the Peter Green Fleetwood Mac stuff,
Yeah.
the blues based, which is how they started. So it's interesting. I have a collection that I think it's a 3 or 4 CD collection of Fleetwood Mac, and it was up to, maybe the mid 90s or right before the dance. So early 90s. Anyway, so there's the Peter Green stuff, and then there's this stuff, and then all the eras past that. It's just they've done it all.
Yes, they have.
And they've lost Christine McVie, so the chances of them all getting back together are probably pretty slim.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit like Led Zeppelin. We've done that. It's over.
Yeah. But Fleetwood Mac, to me, this era, with this personnel is really good kind of background music to have on.
Yeah.
It's nothing that's going to motivate you to go out and,
Chop wood.
or anything. I don't think anything would motivate me to chop wood. But, yep, Fleetwood Mac, second eponymous record. What's your next one, John?
Next. Well,
I've gone to putting the records we've talked about behind here, so I don't have to, do a whole thing.
that's good.
What do you think?
I like it. Well, we're going to go with a little band from Texas,
Oh, man.
ZZ Top Fandango, and they were not going through any changes.
No. I mean, ZZ Top went through one change, and that was 2 years ago when
Yeah.
Dusty Hill died.
And this was their fourth album. It's a live album, and it is for sure one of my favorite live albums.
Yeah, it's so underrated. I mean, the band is underrated.
Yeah, it's just a complete Texas boogie jam.
Yeah, and when Jimi Hendrix thinks that Billy Gibbons is one of the best guitarists out there, that says a lot.
That says a lot.
No, this is great. I actually do not have this. I love this shot on the back though,
Yeah,
from behind Frank's
yeah.
drum kit. It's very cool.
And it's when they were both Billy and Dusty were always wearing hats.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was a show.
It was a show.
And did Frank have a beard at this point?
They had scruffy beards. They didn't have their long beards.
Right. The long
And
beards kind of.
I think Frank just had it looks like he's working on just a long stash.
Yeah, like a Fu Manchu.
Yeah.
Or something. No, ZZ Top. This is London Records too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, ZZ Top, man. They obviously, when Eliminator came out in 82 or 83, they went into more of an electronic
Yeah.
direction, but it still has that blues gravitas. I mean, I love all that stuff. Their early stuff, I think Tejas is probably one of my favorite records of theirs, but they're just a band that's always good.
Absolutely. And timeout, I kind of fibbed. Only one side is live.
Oh, okay.
Side one's live.
Okay.
Side two is some new studio recordings.
Cool. Awesome. Let's see. We've got captured as it came down, hot, spontaneous, and presented to you honestly without the assistance of studio gimmicks. That's what the back says.
Yeah. Tush and Heard It on the X were the
big singles.
Yes.
Yeah. I like to hear you say tush.
Tush.
No, ZZ Top is there is solace in bands like ZZ Top, I think. Same thing with AC/DC. Some bands, like we talked about Bob Dylan and David Bowie. They go through the changes. Speaking of Bowie, bands go through ebbs and flows and change characters and write different kinds of music. But then there's bands like ZZ Top who literally, 50 years into their career are doing basically the same thing that they were doing when they first began.
Yeah, they never.
AC/DC is another example.
Yeah, they're another great example. They never really changed at all. They got a little electronic in the 80s, but it was electronic with their own sound.
Yeah, and of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear that 80s stuff, and it's so identifiable, and it was so different than the stuff they were doing in the 70s, but it's all really, really good.
Yeah, we need to do a top 5 of ZZ Top.
There you go. Top 5 ZZ Top. Write it down. Okay. Well, my next one.
ZZ Leaves.
But we're staying in the Z's. We have Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, One Size Fits All. And it's the album number game. How many albums in 1975 do you think that Frank Zappa had done?
He probably 2, 3,
14.
14.
This is his 14th album.
By 1975. Yeah.
And it's actually the 14th album by the Mothers of Invention and the 20th overall album by Frank Zappa, released in June 1975. Believe it or not, this reached number 26 on the Billboard chart, top LPs and tape chart in the United States in 1975. And Du bist mein Sofa is the single from this. So there you have it. I mean, what can you say about Zappa that hasn't been said already? I mean, think about it. We're not even halfway through the show, and we have talked about David Bowie. We've talked about Bob Dylan. We've talked about Alice Cooper, who Alice Cooper was kind of discovered by Frank Zappa, so that kind of ties in.
Yeah, it ties in.
So this is kind of a characters show.
Yeah,
so
it's
far.
a character. And didn't in 75, didn't the...
Beefheart and Frank Zappa did an album together.
Yeah, but didn't the Mothers of Invention cease to exist?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when they broke up.
Yeah. But, yeah. You got all the lyrics in here. I love the Zappa mustache logo there.
Ooh, that's a good logo.
Yeah. But I don't know. I love the back of it too. He's so trippy. I mean, he was definitely marching to the beat of his own drum.
Yes.
For sure. If you haven't seen that recent Frank Zappa doc that I think Alex Winter from Bill and Ted, he directed it. It's really, really good. But Zappa is like a prodigy, like, notated all the music and just was probably a certifiable genius. Never a drug guy. Never really a drinker. I guess he really liked the ladies. But there are two kinds of people in the world, I think. People that like Zappa, people that seek him out, and people that don't.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of middle ground. I mean,
No, there really isn't.
he's never really had like a hit, although he did with Moon, with Valley Girl, and
Yeah.
later in the 70s. But yeah, Zappa is unto himself, and it's always a trip to listen to Frank Zappa. But if you get a chance, check out that doc, because it is really, really good. And what I like is on the spine of these Zappa records, and you're not going to be able to see it on the shot, but they have a little like thought balloon on there, and it's got the number of what release that was.
Oh, that's cool.
And he's got like 131.
Yeah.
Like, and this says 20. So, But Zappa is someone that I was introduced to by a friend in high school, and it exploded my head. So I've kind of clung on to it. Plus, he's he's had some of the finest musicians in the world play on his albums and touring with him. So
Yeah, it's not just a collection of stuff that's been thrown together.
no.
It's very, very well thought out.
very well thought out and intentional. All right, are we moving out of the Z's?
We're moving out of the Z's.
Do it. Let's go.
In
Oh boy.
April 75, our good old buddy Bob Seger released Beautiful Loser.
He had just raided Leon Russell's wardrobe.
Yes. And Leon had an album come out in 75 as well.
Yeah, he did.
But I don't think Leon minded too much.
No.
This was Bob's, his 8th studio album.
That's crazy. And, this was at a time, Bob's from Detroit, Alice Cooper's from Detroit, the White Stripes from Detroit, Iggy and the Stooges are from Detroit. This was a time when the Midwest was really shining because at the same time you also had Cheap Trick, who was from Rockford, Illinois. I mean, the Midwest had their moment in the sun in the 70s for
Yeah,
sure.
there was a lot of stuff going on. Well, and the Jackson family.
Yep. And, we've talked about it before, but we won't go into the whole long story. But Bob Seger's the reason that Wheels and I kind of started collecting records and hanging out and looking for honey holes together.
Indeed it is.
So it's very fitting that we're talking about Bob.
Yeah, and the big songs off it were Beautiful Loser, Kathmandu, and Nutbush City Limits. I've not been to Nutbush City.
I have.
Have you?
Yeah. It's
Did
very,
you-
very bushy.
Did you go to the Limits?
I normally do.
Well, you're a beautiful loser.
Beautiful, at least, or a loser. Now, Bob Seger, as I get older, I appreciate what he does more and more, and he's kind of wrapped things up. He did a tour. I think was trying to do a tour like in 20, like everybody else, and then that got postponed.
Yeah.
And kind of a farewell thing. But I think he's up there too. He's like in his early 80s.
Yeah, all these guys are getting old.
Yeah.
Anybody who had anything in the 70s.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I think we all take for granted is that we've had the opportunity to see this music performed live by the people who recorded it. One of these days, that's not going to be possible.
And did you know Nutbush City Limits, I just had to get that in again, is a cover of an Ike and Tina song.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I have heard that. Well, it's a funny name.
Yeah.
Ike and Tina. I'm sure they probably had an album out in 75 too. The 75.
The 75.
We should call it The 75. And then you have this black and white portrait of Robert on the back.
Looking into the distance,
You know what he's looking at.
Nutbush City Limits.
He certainly is. You wouldn't think that a city like that would have limits,
Yeah.
but it does, apparently. Well, that's great, man. I love it.
Yeah, and this was, he used mostly session musicians on this record.
Oh, did he?
From the Muscle Shoals rhythm section.
Oh, man.
And the Silver Bullet band members were used separately on songs like Nutbush.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly these session folks from Muscle Shoals.
I don't have Beautiful Loser. I've got a lot of his stuff because when we first got together, the story is that his music wasn't being made available on streaming services, so a lot of his records were being nabbed up by people that were maybe collected back in the day, and then records were coming back. So we went out on a Bob Seger record hunt. And I think I have most of his stuff, but I don't think I have Beautiful Loser.
Yeah,
His stuff gets
It gets snapped up pretty quick.
It does, but people listen to it. And,
Yeah.
and they weren't careful with it.
No.
You know, you don't see used stuff by him that's in great shape.
No.
A lot.
Because it got played a lot.
Yeah, right in the middle of the 70s where people were just soaking up as much music as they can.
Yeah.
So that's a good one, man. I like it.
You're next.
Well, Come Taste the Band is the 10th album by Deep Purple, co-produced and engineered by the band and longtime associate Martin Birch. Musically, the record shows stronger funk influences than in their previous albums. This is the band's Mark IV lineup. So you have Tommy Bolin on guitar, David Coverdale lead vocals, Glenn Hughes on bass and vocals. The big song on this is Getting Tighter, and that was released. Wait a minute. Okay, so this came out in 75, strangely, but these singles, Getting Tighter, released February 1976, and You Keep On Moving, released March 76. So that's interesting. The album,
When did the album come out in 75?
November.
November. So that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it doesn't really, though.
Well, not in today's market, but
Yeah.
in yesteryear, a lot of times singles were released, they wanted to see how the album tracked.
Yeah. But I've always loved the cover. It's the brandy snifter
Yeah.
with them in it. It's just great. And then you have the empty glass on the back with the lipstick. Let's look at the gatefold. You got some some shots of the guys.
Yeah, you got to love the gatefolds with the pictures.
Yeah. And David Coverdale coming into this band breathed a whole new life into the band. And then he eventually went on to start Whitesnake as a blues-based rock band. And I've always loved Coverdale's voice. I mean,
yeah.
so distinctive, and that voice.
It's so deep.
Yeah, so it's just got a lot of power behind
Yeah.
it. And he's so funny. I may have told this story before, but he was just like a working guy that I think sang at bars and stuff, never a true professional. And when they called for auditions for this band, there's some story about he didn't have an 8x10 or photo like that to send in with the audition. So he sent his Boy Scout photo, whatever the British version of the
Yeah.
Boy Scouts was. So a picture of him when he was a kid, which might have gotten him ahead of other people.
Yeah.
But I think he said it was his mom that suggested he send that picture in or something. And
Always listen to your mom.
yeah, and then he becomes the singer of one of. Now, the one thing is, especially, I talk about Deep Purple on this show occasionally. I'm not a huge Deep Purple fan, but I know that they are one of those bands that is nowhere near as popular in the U.S. as they are in Europe and the rest of the world. I mean, Deep Purple is looked at in Europe as one of the top-notch bands, and they're still out there doing it, man, recording albums and playing shows. But I always, I really love Glenn Hughes, and he is a fantastic singer in and of himself. But he's on bass on this. But the two of those guys singing together in this era of Deep Purple is really, really great. So, Deep Purple, Come Taste the Band, everybody.
Nice. Well, let's bring it up.
Okay.
War. Why can't we be friends?
I love the cover of this.
In April of 75, I love the cover of this. And I picked this up at a show based on Michael Young's recommendation.
Oh, yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, hey, go over there. You need to get this album.
Yeah.
Snapped it up right away.
Yeah, Michael has albums that he is certainly an advocate of.
Yeah, and it's, War was one of those bands. The genre is reggae, R&B, soul, funk, pop.
Rock.
You pick one.
Yeah, they're all of those things.
Yeah, they're everything kind of blended together.
I was gonna
It's
say
a stew.
I was going to say put in a blender and mixed up. But I would say stew, because stew means a stew, everything retains its own shape and flavor and everything combines.
Yeah. So it was a jambalaya.
A jambalaya
Yeah.
of music.
We'll,
I like
keep
that.
the reggae
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. Look at all these people that are being friends on the back here.
And it was, let's see, it was from their, it's the 7th studio album from War. And War had gone through not a lot of changes, but certainly in the early days with Eric Burden, it was a different band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, this is, it is a song that you may hear as a casual fan, and you may not know who the artist is, but you know the song.
Yeah.
You've seen a movie with the song in it, or seen a TV show or a commercial. You've heard the song on the radio. It's almost like it exists everywhere somehow, and they still fly under the radar.
Yeah, they really do. It's one of those, even the albums don't get snatched up at shows, but I highly recommend, if you see a War album, pick it up. You'll love it.
Yeah, there's just so much going on.
Yeah, there really is.
A lot of percussion. I mean, that in the 70s, it seems like there was a lot of funk and soul influence. I mean, at this point in 75, disco was happening, right? But it wasn't necessarily called disco at that
Yeah,
point.
it wasn't. It was more funk and soul.
Yeah, but see, funk and soul was making its way into regular pop. And then you also had reggae.
Yeah.
I pronounced it correctly. You had bands like The Police, Bob Marley. I mean, it was such an interesting time because people were hearing forms of music that they hadn't heard before. And that's pretty exciting.
Yes, it is. And, the funny thing about Why Can't We Be Friends, it reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. And it was played in outer space when NASA beamed it, linking to the Soviet cosmonauts and U.S. astronauts.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
So that's kind of cool. It was
Yeah.
a space song.
It was like an olive branch through space.
Yeah. Here you go, Russia. Why can't we be friends?
Why can't we?
The critical reception, hot on the heels of Walking on the Sun, their previous wonderfully festive rendition of War's pop and R&B, Chestnut. The song's original funk flavor arranged to Smash Mouth's pop ska style.
Interesting. I'm not quite sure what you said there.
Yeah, I don't even know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well,
Well,
we'll see. We'll listen to it again. They're a great band. It's fun. I was just telling you guys before we recorded that I have kind of reorganized all my records. I got a new Calax this last weekend and put it together. I have more space. And it always surprises me how much going through my records makes me feel about my music. You know what I mean? It kind of solidifies that relationship that I have with my music. And I'll be flipping through looking for 1975 albums, and I'll see other stuff that I forgot I had, and I'll throw it on and listen to it. It's just such a great hands-on way to, enhance your relationship with your music. What do you think?
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So I do know, and I don't have to go to my records to tell you that I have 0 War.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I need to do something about that. Still Crazy After All These Years is the 4th solo studio album by Paul Simon, released October 17, 1975. This has got a bunch of singles on it. Gone at Last, My Little Town. The big one on here is 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Which is in the 70s, you heard that all the time. And then Still Crazy After All These Years. the big reason that this is kind of a big deal is that Art Garfunkel came back into the fray for this album. My Little Town recorded as a duet with he and Paul Simon, and Gone at Last was a duet between Simon and Phoebe Snow. Again, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section play on 2 tracks as a backing band. So
They were busy in the 70s.
Those guys were really busy in the 70s. And, you know, it's funny because those studio musicians or musicians from a certain region will get that notoriety, and then everybody wants to have something to do with them.
Yeah.
Another documentary I was watching recently, and I haven't watched the whole thing, is the Stax documentary.
Oh, yeah. I've watched a little bit of that, too.
Oh my God, it is so great. The music, how that music like came from around that neighborhood
Yeah.
and became like a phenomenon across the world. Really crazy. And a lot of these musicians at that time were black musicians who in the U.S., you know, at the time, it was still segregated. But when they toured in Europe, it was not. So it's a really interesting perspective. But I always loved 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and Still Crazy After All These Years. But
Yeah,
when I
those are
heard-
great. I'm not a huge Paul Simon fan, but I do love those 2 songs.
Yeah, and again, his music was just everywhere in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I left the price tag on this. I got this at Half Price Books in 2007, and it was $4 in 2007. So that was pretty expensive.
For 2007.
Yeah, yeah. But I've always loved that picture of him like on the fire escape. And then, you know, the back's just got the simple lyrics to the songs.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thanks. This is, you know, later, I think in 1981, Simon and Garfunkel did the reunion where they played the show in Central Park.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal, too. I mean, Paul Simon's another one of those characters that's just had many careers.
Yes, he has.
Maybe the theme of the show is 9 Lives instead of 1975.
It could be.
What's your next one?
Well, we're going to do a glamour shot.
Oh, yes.
Hall & Oates. Hall & Oates. And, you know, their 4th studio album, they just called Hall & Oates,
Yeah.
which is kind of strange. I mean,
Yeah, like to have the eponymous album not be the first.
Yeah.
That's happened many times.
yeah, it's happened a bunch.
Yeah.
But the cover is so weird.
Well, they were, you know, kind of getting into that, what do you call it? Androgynous.
Yeah.
The androgyny thing was becoming a big deal. David Bowie, Mick Jagger, everybody was kind of Iggy Pop. They were,
Well, glam rock was still pretty much raging.
yeah. And, you know, they were just finding their footing. I mean,
Yeah.
I have always loved these guys because they are like Philadelphia soul,
Yeah.
first and foremost, and singer-songwriters. And their voices blended so well. But yeah, this cover is some. Who's the woman that John Oates is with here?
Yeah. It's Aerosmith would later write about this. Dude looks like a lady.
Nice call forward.
But this is known as the Silver album because it's just silver metallic.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
You can see it better on the back.
Yeah, I've always liked that
look.
silver foil.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. Like Kiss Double Platinum is one
Yeah.
of my favorites. It's very much that way.
And there were 3 singles: Camellia, Alone Too Long, and Sarah Smile.
Oh, Sarah Smile.
Yeah, that's the one that everybody's going to know.
Yeah, that's a classic. Hall & Oates, man. It's funny because, you know, they've been around for a long, long time, and now they're like battling and no longer together and not touring.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's crazy that careers last long enough for that kind of thing to happen, right? I mean, we're in a post Hall & Oates world right now, folks. Put your seatbelts on. Anything else about the amount of rouge that John Oates has on?
No, it was. It's just a weird cover that. Let's see. Yeah, glam rock was an influence.
Mm-hmm.
And the cover came about after Hall & Oates happened to meet Pierre LaRoche, a makeup artist, and who he was living in Greenwich Village like they were, and he said he wanted to do an album cover with them, and he said it will immortalize you, and it kind of did. Because this cover is really, pretty well known.
Yeah, it's infamous.
Yes.
It's so funny. Their music speaks for itself. Luckily, they're an artist that can have a misstep like this, and their music still goes on, and their career still continues. But, for some people, and there's something on John's mustache there, there's
It's okay.
there's some people who wouldn't be able to bands or groups that wouldn't be able to survive something like that.
No.
So that's a good one, man.
Yeah, Hall & Oates.
Well, Katie Lied is the Steely Dan album. It's their fourth album, released in March of 1975. And the big songs off of here are Black Friday, which was released in May 1975, and Bad Sneakers in September. Excuse me. This album was the first one recorded by Steely Dan after Jeff Skunk Baxter and drummer Jim Hodder left the group as a result of Walter Becker and Donald Fagen's decision to stop touring and focus solely on recording with studio musicians. Now, the song Black Friday is so great. I love it. But I love everything that they do. And we're going to circle back to that Yacht Rock documentary, because a big thing in that documentary is they talk about Steely Dan being Yacht Rock. But Donald Fagen wants nothing to do with the Yacht Rock label.
No, I don't want it.
Yeah. But I love Steely Dan. They kind of did a Beatles-ish thing. Like I just said, they're like, we're not going to tour anymore. We're just going to make music. And their music is so well recorded. And sonically, it's so great. But it's so polarizing to so many people too, because you've got people who are, Dylan fans or not Dylan fans. You got people who are Steely Dan fans who are not Steely Dan fans. And I as a young kid in high school trying to play jazz music is kind of where I got into Steely Dan and learned about them.
That makes sense.
But I didn't really start listening to them until college. And there may or may not have been various substances involved. But yeah, I listened. Steely Dan to me is kind of like a headphone band. You put it on, you put the headphones on, you can hear all of those details and all of those unbelievably good musicians. I mean, the best musicians in the world played on these records.
Yeah, Steely Dan's just one of those bands it doesn't
Click.
resonate with me.
Yeah. I've always loved the cover here too.
Yeah, that's a cool cover.
The Praying Mantis. This one's pretty well beat.
Yeah.
I have all their stuff. Actually, I may not have Pretzel Logic on vinyl, but they've started to reissue these. This is an ABC issue of this, but I love the pics of the guys on the back too.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. And there's Michael McDonald. Mike McDonald singing backing. Jeff Porcaro.
He's Mike on there.
Yeah. Yep. Donald Fagen, Denny Diaz. Walter Becker, Gary Katz, Roger Nichols. Yeah. Steely Dan is, people, like I said, love him or hate him. But give them a chance, because there are some songs, like Black Friday is a big one. I almost posted it on the Vinyl Ventures Facebook page on Black Friday this year, but I didn't, because then I thought it might start a torrent of I hate Steely Dan, or I love Steely Dan. So if you ever need to like test your system, see how it sounds, a Steely Dan record is a good way to do that.
And that may be one of the reasons, because audio guys always use Steely Dan for audio checks.
Yeah, like in the industry, we work in the TV and video industry and at events or whatever. So
It drives me nuts.
audio guys always play Steely Dan to test the system, but it sounds good. You may not like the song, but it sounds good. What's your next one?
Well, how about a little band called Roxy Music and Siren? I've always loved this cover. I've had this album for years.
He always has scantily clad pretty women on his album covers.
And the previous album before this was their, their fifth studio album. The previous one was Country Life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, enough said.
And we know that one.
Yes, we do. No, it's cool. Kind of a mermaid there on the rocks.
And this has probably one of Roxy Music's best-known songs, Love is a Drug.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first single released in September of '75. And then Both Ends Burning was the other single. So not a lot of singles out of this, but Love is the Drug, or Love is the Drug. That's the one that really left its mark. And this was, the lady in this picture was then Brian Ferry's girlfriend.
Oh, was she?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you know who it is?
No.
Later became Mick Jagger's wife,
Bianca?
Jerry Hall.
Oh, that's Jerry Hall?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. I had no idea. Huh. I remember her as a blonde. She kind of looks like a redhead here.
Well, I don't even know that. Well, yeah, are there seashells on her? She's a siren. Who knows?
Oh, okay. Like a siren, mermaid type person. Well, Brian Ferry followed his muse for sure, right?
Yeah, it had a very good critical reception. Everybody loved it. They thought
their music is like very different. I wouldn't call it like goth.
It's ethereal.
It's definitely ethereal, and it's not right down the middle. I mean, it's certainly a different kind of genre, or it's its own thing.
It's its own thing. It's a little bit like some Pink Floyd stuff, where it's not something that's going to
uplift you,
but it's great to put on and have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
No, that's a good one. I don't have any of their stuff. I've just never like connected with them, but they would have like hit the scene when you were like in your mid-teens, right?
Well, I mean, they were, of course, this came out in '75, but, they were still going in the 80s, still well known in the 80s.
Yeah.
But I think really, the late '70s, after this album came out, really, they kind of took off.
Yeah. And I didn't mean mid-teens, but you would have been like a music fan when they were becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And it's again, whatever you want to call their genre was happening at the same time that like David Bowie, Bob Dylan, punk was starting to happen. Singer-songwriters were coming onto the scene. People who used to write jingles were putting albums out, like Carole King or Just all kinds of strange musical stuff was happening in 1975.
Yeah, it really was. The band, it still remains one of Roxy Music's most critically acclaimed albums.
Yeah, Love is the Drug. That makes sense for sure. Well, that's a good one, man. Man, how Jerry Hall.
Yeah, Jerry Hall.
What a strange couple she and Mick Jagger made. I mean,
Well,
she was like
she was working her way through the rock stars.
So Brian Ferry, who else was she involved with?
Boy, I don't know.
They're
I know Mick and Brian are
working their way through the
Yeah.
rock stars. That's good. That's a good one, man. Well, I've always loved the cover of this. So, Wish You Were Here. This is Pink Floyd's 9th studio album. This was released September 1975. The singles were Have a Cigar, and that's it. Wish You Were Here isn't even listed as one of the singles. And it's definitely one that you hear almost ubiquitously on not adult contemporary, but like on rock radio.
Yeah,
it's
classic rock radio.
Yeah, one of their songs that you just hear all the time. And it's the second album with a conceptual theme, mostly at Roger Waters' direction. It reflects his feeling that the camaraderie that had served the band was by then largely absent. So, you had you had a band whose leader disappeared, right? And then the other guys in the band kind of have to fill that vacuum between Roger Waters and David Gilmour. And there's always that push and shove in a situation like that. And trying to fill the shoes of someone like Syd Barrett would be very difficult. It would be like the Beatles becoming famous and then John Lennon, quitting the band, or Paul McCartney quitting the band. It's almost something that if you mention it, you're like, oh, we can't survive that. But they did. And I think the amount of effort that it took and the amount of just internal struggle that it caused really put a lot of strife on Pink Floyd.
Yeah, and they were touring in the 70s like mad.
Yeah.
I mean, like all the bands.
Yeah. But, Shine On You Crazy Diamond is a big song on this, and it's a very long song. And there's a story about when they were recording it, and it's about Syd. When they were recording it, he just showed up in the studio out of nowhere after none of them seeing him for years. And he was like unrecognizable. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy what happened to him.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's since passed away. It's also crazy that a band like this, that is arguably one of the biggest bands, even, against the odds, one of the biggest bands in rock history, can't pull it together, can't get back together. I mean, Richard Wright just passed away a few years ago. So it's really not a reunion if they were to get back together, but there's still three guys alive. And I appreciate Pink Floyd more and more. I mean, you were saying, what were you listening to the other day? And you said, this is not uplifting music. Was it Obscured by Clouds?
Yeah. Which is very strange.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, they're also a band that was not afraid to take chances.
Yeah.
That's kind of a theme with a lot of these artists we're talking about from 1975.
Yeah, they all took tons of chances and put out the music they wanted to put out.
Yeah.
And the Pink Floyd, we've talked about this before, but the Pink Floyd represses are so good.
Yeah, I think they came out in 16.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But from packaging to the records just sound so much better.
Oh yeah. They're great. And I love the robot shaking the human hand, or is it two robots? Yeah, it's two robot hands.
It's two
shaking.
robots.
And I love the other cover of the guy shaking the hand with the guy on fire.
Yeah.
It's just
Which is
iconic.
on the inside, but
Inside.
this is the kind of the slip.
Yeah, outer slipcase. Now, Pink Floyd, is ubiquitous now. They're just part of all of our psyches.
Yeah, they really are.
It's really, really crazy. And, that's a mark of a good band.
It is.
Yeah.
If you can last that long.
If you can.
Right now, I'm going to talk about Patti Smith,
Oh,
Horses.
Of course you are.
This was Patti's debut album in November of '75, and the song Gloria that was it. That was the single.
Yeah. She's such an interesting character, man. And I know you looked for this for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's not an original. It's a repress. All the originals I found were just so worked over that I'm like, I'm just going to get a repress.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with repops, man.
No. And I mean, that's a whole nother discussion where, people want the original and they don't care how it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I want the music to sound great.
Yeah, for me, I have to agree. Now, I do have some, since we've been doing this, I've bought more repops than I probably did before we started doing the show. But the music and the quality of the sound is utmost for me. So even if I'm buying a used record, if the record is in good shape, I'm more likely to buy it than if I'm relying on the cover to be in good shape.
Yeah.
It's just, then that's a personal thing.
We're in it for the music, not. We're collecting, but we're not collecting
to sell
to make money.
Yeah, and a lot of people, people come at this this crazy sickness from a lot of different angles. But anyway, so Patti Smith Horses, this has been a big album for you for a long time.
Oh yeah, I love every song on this album.
And she's just like almost an anti-pop star.
Yeah, she really is. She was in New York and she was really part of that punk scene. Mm-hmm. To put her in with it's definitely not punk, the music, but it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of, I would almost go out on a limb and say like the beginnings of like alternative, whatever you want to call that. Where somebody hears something performed live and they're like, ooh, this may appeal to a lot more people out there.
Yeah, and in New York, you had Max's Kansas City, CBGB's. All those clubs were catering to this type of music.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the scene at the time when you think about it. You had bands like Television. You had bands like the Ramones,
Talking Heads, Blondie,
Devo. All of those bands were bubbling up at the time, and it's just so wild to think about that.
Well, and Alice Cooper was playing with a lot of those in a lot of those clubs too.
Yeah. So, what a crazy time it would have been.
Yeah.
To be around in New York at the time. And
New York was just a hotbed for music at the time.
And Patti was actually, I don't know that she was ever married, but she was involved with Robert Mapplethorpe, who was a very controversial photographer in the 70s.
Yeah, it's really, if you're classifying it, everybody classifies it as punk.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it was it embraced more of an avant-garde and other musical styles.
Yeah.
It was just so different that nobody had ever heard anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the cover too. Is it Annie Leibovitz that took this cover?
Let's see the artwork.
I could be wrong.
No, it's Mapplethorpe.
Oh, it is Robert.
Yeah.
Okay, so Robert Mapplethorpe took the picture on the cover. Yeah. That's cool. Well, that makes sense. Just go through that whole thing about him, and yeah, he's the one that took the cover.
And the plain white shirt she is wearing was purchased at Salvation Army.
Oh, cool.
Because at the time, you could live in a New York apartment pretty cheap.
Yeah. Not like today.
No.
It's like prohibitively expensive
Yeah.
for anybody that's not like a son of a sultan or something.
Yeah.
That's a good one, man. I like it. And I do like the back. It's kind of got the sort of the jazz treatment. You've got the musicians there and a nice little biography thing.
Yeah, it's very jazz-like on
Yeah.
the back. But I mean, the front cover was kind of a departure for female artists at the time because she is in that androgynous thing, but she doesn't look very female.
No. Oh, that's true. That's like the other
Yeah,
side of that.
so it's the other side of the coin.
Huh.
So it was going on in all rock music.
Yeah. That's crazy. Good point. I learned something today, John.
Patti Smith, horses. Oh,
We're not going to spend too much time on it. Kiss put out Alive in 1975. Kind of like as a last gasp by the record company to get them to break because they really hadn't broken. And they had 3 albums. They had their eponymous album, Hotter Than Hell, and Dressed to Kill, which is the studio album that Rock and Roll All Night was originally on. As we know, nobody remembers the studio version of that song. Everybody knows the live version that came off of Alive. And that's basically the spark that lit the Kiss fire that burned until last year when they played their last show. They played their last show over a year ago, like a year and a week ago.
Wow.
In New York City. Isn't that crazy?
that's nuts.
Yeah. But this is Kiss Alive. It's a double live album. We've learned in the many years since 1975 when this came out that it really isn't live, but that doesn't matter. But this is like their career-defining album. When people talk about that album that just set fire, it was this one. Kind of
Yes.
like Frampton Comes Alive
Yeah.
for Peter Frampton. It's crazy how much of a career-defining record this was. Obviously, the inside of this is screwed up, but there's the first 3 albums, and then they have a letter on here from each of the guys in the band to the fans. And yeah, man, I struggled with whether or not to talk about this or Dressed to Kill because I love Dressed to Kill. It's probably in my top 5, even though it wasn't when we did our Kiss top
Yeah.
5. But everything about Kiss Alive is awesome. The pictures, the music, the crowd noise, the excitement. The picture of the 2 kids on the back here with the bed sheet that's got the Kiss thing drawn on it. It's just, and this is like a greatest hits of their first 3 albums.
Yeah.
And
It's the one that really catapulted them.
oh yeah, yeah. So the reason we're talking about Kiss is because of Kiss Alive.
Yes.
So, all right, man.
All right.
We've each got 2 more,
2 more. Mm-hmm. So
and then we'll maybe talk about a couple, like, you know.
I'm going to talk about a soundtrack, Tommy, the movie. And it was based on The Who. I mean, this is The Who. Mm-hmm. But there were some other artists who kind of played around in this. Elton John played the
Pinball Wizard.
Pinball Wizard.
Yeah.
Anne Margaret was in it.
Yeah.
It just, the film really, really catapulted.
A lot. It catapulted the Who for sure, but you know there were a lot of people playing parts in it.
Yeah, and it had a lot of session musicians in it, which was a little bit different. But it just really and there were special thanks in the album credits with the help of the Faces, Ronnie Wood, Keith Moon, and the song "Pinball Wizard" performed by Elton John is the lone single on the soundtrack.
Which is crazy to me.
Yeah,
No, Elton was everywhere Like, it was, I'm sure the discussion was, well, who can we get to play the Pinball Wizard? Well, Elton. Everywhere you look, you see Elton.
And it was a gold record in Canada, the U.S., and the U.K.
I'm just going to keep saying the word Elton.
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 Elton. Elton. No, The Who is so different than like every other British import.
Yeah.
It's like, a lot of people refer to it as like maximum R&B, and there is rhythm and blues in there, but The Who also got really heavy at times too, and really light. And they did, the concept albums, they did a lot of that. So, I mean, they were in and of themselves, and, the writing behind it is Pete Townsend.
Pete
Yeah.
wrote all the stuff.
Yeah. And they were just such a powerhouse band, with Keith Moon on drums and Entwistle on bass. They are such a distinctive band, and it's not just because CBS uses their music for the theme to every version of CSI.
Yeah, you hear their music pop up in shows constantly because it's so bombastic.
Yeah.
It's a great lead in.
Yeah. Really heavy guitar
Yeah.
and powerful drums. It's just, I think that they kind of get lost in the British invasion. They
really do.
They aren't talked about as much as they probably should be.
Yeah.
I mean, Roger Daltrey's voice is just, at his peak, he was just on fire.
Absolutely.
And they're still doing it
Yeah.
today. I don't know that they're going to tour anymore, but one of the things that bands, when they get to that stage, do is they don't tour, but they'll do like a residency,
Yeah.
like in Vegas or
Yeah.
somewhere where the fans come to them and they don't have to travel.
Yeah, and they don't have to do as long sets.
Right. No, that's a good one, man. Yeah, we have starring Anne Margaret, Oliver Reed, Roger Daltrey, Elton John, guest artist Eric Clapton, John Entwistle, Keith Moon, Paul Nicholas, Jack Nicholson, Robert Powell, Pete Townsend, Tina Turner.
Yeah, it's a hit list from the word go.
Yeah, that's a good one, man.
The Who,
Tommy. And this is my Rush Archives because I do not have this album individually. Rush Archives was actually, it was done by a lot of bands in the 70s. Rush did Archives, so it was their first 3 albums collected in one set. So you have their self-titled album. You've got Fly By Night, which is the one I'm talking about here, and then Caress of Steel was their third, as you can see here on the back. This was a big thing in the 70s. They did the same thing with Kiss, called Kiss Archives, and that's got Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, and Dress to Kill contained in it. Anyway, Fly By Night is the second studio album by Rush, released February 1975. It was the first Rush album to showcase elements of progressive rock for which the band would become known. Like their first album was these Canadian kids trying to be a Led Zeppelin trio.
Yeah.
But this is it dovetails nicely because John Rutsey was their original drummer. He left after the first album, and then Neil Peart came in, and he was their drummer from Fly By Night on. And that's where that progressive change takes place. I mean, he began to write all the lyrics, and then the music became more complicated and like different time signatures and just concept album after concept album. They were, again, much like Kiss, they had albums, 3-4 albums until they really took off. It wasn't for Rush, it wasn't until 2112 happened where they really took off, and that was a concept. One half of that album is a concept album, So we've had that discussion. Bands used to have that safety net of the first few records, and they don't anymore.
No.
I mean, if you're a new band and a record company takes their chance with you and you don't take off, you're
done.
Yeah, you're probably not going to stick around long. But the single off of this is the song "Fly By Night," and that was released in April of '75, and this was recorded during the last week of December 1974, and mixed in early January '75, and Lifeson said it took around 5 days to record, and once the mixing had finished, the group packed their cases and traveled to Winnipeg, starting their fly-by-night tour on January 15th. So they recorded this album in a week.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And, Neil Peart passed away a couple of years ago, so this is just another example of, like, a major rock artists from the 70s that's just no more.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer. I know you're not a Rush guy, but I like the portraits of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So very cool. You've got Neil and his he looks like he could have been an extra in Lord of the Rings or something. But yeah, if you ever see this in good shape, grab it. Because
Yeah.
it's one that a lot of people like. This one has been worn for sure.
That's a good one.
Thanks.
Well, let's mellow out a little bit. And somebody we never talk about, Cat Stevens' greatest hits.
Oh,
And this was Cat Stevens. I mean, it was his 6th album, and it's basically the hits off the first 5 studio albums.
he was so big in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Like everywhere. I've actually seen Cat Stevens perform live. Did you know that?
Really?
At the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014.
Oh, yeah. You've talked about that.
When I was 40, yeah, he was one of the guys inducted, and it was awesome. He converted to Islam and changed his name to Yusuf Islam.
Yeah.
And left music.
Yeah.
I mean, literally one of the biggest stars of the 70s is like, I'll see ya.
I'm done.
I'm done. And he's come back recently.
Yeah.
And put a couple albums out.
I think when money is the driving factor, it's like, ooh.
Yeah, but I don't think he needed it because he wrote his stuff and performed it.
So he had all the rights.
Yeah. What do we have on here?
Let's see. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Wild World,
Oh, yeah.
Oh Very Young, Moon Dance, Peace Train, Father and Son, Morning Has Broken,
Oh,
Another Saturday Night. And there's some other songs, but those are the ones that are going to grab you.
it's basically a greatest hits.
Yeah, there's only...
Wait a minute.
But there is one new song on here.
Yeah.
One song that had... And a lot of bands, even now,
Do that.
do that. They'll put a cover or an unusual song
Or an outtake from the
or an
studio.
outtake. So there's one new song, Two Fine People, and that is really the single that came out of this.
I don't have this on vinyl. And this is one that I've had in my hands so many times, especially since I saw him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He sang Peace Train that night, and the whole place was like going absolutely apeshit when he did Peace Train. It was an experience
Yeah.
like that neither my wife nor I were prepared for, because that's the year. The reason we went is because I was turning 40, and that's the year that Kiss got inducted, and Kiss was being a group of millionaire assholes and decided not to play because they didn't want to play with Ace and Peter, so it was a whole like Kiss drama. But Hall & Oates were inducted that night. Nirvana performed. Cat
Ooh,
Stevens,
that's a good class.
Peter Gabriel.
That's a really good
Oh,
class.
what a great night. So I've always loved Cat Stevens because you heard him all the time in the 70s. But after seeing him, I'm absolutely a fan. That's great, man.
Yeah,
That's a
this
good
is an inherited copy. I'd like to get a nice copy of this, but he's just not somebody I put on a lot.
one. Right. That's a good one. Well, this guy put 2 albums out in 1975. There's kind of a theme here. This is Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy by Elton John. And This is okay. We'll play the game again. What number of Elton's albums do you think this is?
This is probably his seventh?
Ninth.
Ninth.
Yep. This is his ninth album, released on May 23, 1975. The single is Someone Saved My Life Tonight, and that was released June 1975. Bernie Taupin has said that the songs were written in chronological order, and this is a concept album that gives an autobiographical glimpse at the struggles John, Captain Fantastic, and Taupin, Brown Dirt Cowboy, had in the early years of their musical careers, leading up to John's eventual breakthrough in 1970. The lyrics and accompanying photo booklet are infused with a specific sense of place and time that would otherwise be rare in John's music. John composed the music on a ship voyage from the UK to New York. So that's how they work. I mean, Bernie writes the lyrics down and Elton puts the music to it. It's crazy.
It's a neat relationship.
It really is, and kind of singular in popular music.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of collaborators, and a lot of times writers will work with other writers to bounce ideas off of each other, and this is obviously one. They were kind of put together and didn't know how it would turn out, and now, 60 years later, look at them.
They're still going.
They're still going. And I love the artwork on this. It's always kind of reminded me of comic book stuff. And then you have portraits. Hey, Bernie, we're here to take your photo. Let me take my shirt off. It's probably not going to. I mean, it's not a great photo anyway. But yeah, Bernie definitely just marches to the beat of his own drum. He's kind of almost like a hermit. And there's more artwork here. You don't hear a lot from Bernie. He did put a book out a couple years ago that I've heard is really, really good. It must be interesting to be the guy that writes Elton John's lyrics and just to have that relationship. Elton, he's another one, man. He's like a chameleon. He's had many iterations and lives and hits and different, probably 6 or 7 different decades.
Yeah.
He's re-recorded one of his songs as a hit 3 different times. I mean, Elton is a treasure, not just a national treasure, a treasure to the world.
Yes, to the music world, for
but
sure.
I've always loved the artwork on this. And,
that's
the way the album looks.
It's a classic.
I just remember him. I think it had to be a show from the 70s or the 80s where he's playing Dodger Stadium, I think, and he's got that Donald Duck outfit on. I mean, he really became a front man. I mean, he is definitely one of those dudes from the 70s that when you're thinking of someone who has the goods musically and is just something you can't take your eyes off, that's this guy. Right?
Elton.
Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. Well, it's always fun to... Oh, there's Kenny again.
Oh, let me put one more up.
Okay, yeah.
We've talked about this a bunch, but we'd be amiss if we didn't talk about physical graffiti in 75. We don't have to go into any detail with it. It was just Led Zeppelin's double album that was, some people will say, their best.
Yeah, and much like the White Album, the older I get, the more I appreciate the White Album and the more I appreciate physical graffiti. I mean, physical graffiti is just, it's almost like a different band. You know what I mean? It's almost like Led Zeppelin isn't the same band when they did this. And there was, leftover music and stuff and things that they intentionally recorded for this. But it just ages very, very well.
Yeah, it ages super well.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go into detail about that, but we can't talk about 75 and not have this one.
Yeah, and since we're doing it, I'm not taking it out of the condom, and Jacob's going to hate me, but there's Dressed to Kill by Kiss.
Yeah.
The one with Rock and Roll All Night on it. And they're just standing out on a street corner in New York City in their suits. And if you look closely, there's like a guy driving by in a Camaro, and the look on his face is like, what
What
the
is
hell's
going on?
Why are these guys in kabuki makeup and suits? Anyway, it's fun to look back at a specific year, and we've kind of gotten in the habit of doing it every year. It's just hard to believe this music's 50 years old.
Yeah,
you know?
it really is.
I mean, I'll be 51 this year. You'll be an age, and
Older.
it's just I look back on my life, like the major signposts are kind of like the music I listened to and the concerts I went to.
It's the time machine.
It is, and all you have to do, like I was reorganizing all my stuff, all my records the other day, and I was just putting records on, and it is such it fills my heart to do that. You know what I mean? Because like I said earlier in the episode, I feel like the digging through and finding the records and alphabetizing them, it's just such an intimate relationship that you have with your music that you can't have with a playlist on a computer.
Right.
Right. Well, it's been a lot of fun taking this trip back to 1975. We've taken a lot of trips over the last couple of years, and if you go to our YouTube channel, you can check all of those out. We've got shorts, we've got long shows, we've got mediums, which are the like 5 to 10 minute videos. What else do we want people to do if they're going to check that out?
Like, subscribe, and share.
And just keep coming with those show ideas. Keep coming with those things that you'd like to see us unbox. All of these things are on the table. We can't do this without you guys, and we need you to subscribe to that YouTube channel. Hey, go out there and download the YouTube Music app, and you can listen to the shows and watch them on that. We love you guys to watch them because those count toward our hours on YouTube. Anything else we want people to do?
Comment.
Let us know all of those things. And the most important thing we want you guys to do is to have a safe and happy new year. And you know what? There's nothing better than staying home, ringing in the new year, listening to your vinyl collection. That's Wheels. That's our Vinyl Ventures record. I'm Jay, and we'll see you all the next time around.
It's a vinyl venture.